so it's 2:30. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to just alert everybody and let you know that the meeting's being recorded. We'll probably share it on the WATESOL website in the future so that people can view it who weren't able to attend today. If you prefer to not have your image recorded, you can just turn your video off. So please keep that in mind. So I'm very happy to introduce Lee Shainis from Intercambio, one of our exhibitors, and he'll be presenting on the topic, Fostering Judgment-Free Zones and Interesting Cultural Conversations that Fuel Mutual Learning and Accelerate Language Acquisition. So Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you. That was a title is a mouthful. Well, thank you all for being here. If you do want to show your video, great. If not, I understand. We're going to try to do I try to make this a combination of a conversation, discussion, and presentation. So I'll be asking you questions, and feel free to unmute yourself at any time to chime in. So actually, I'll start with a question just as a warm up. What is something, have you had a conversation with your English learners recently where you learned something interesting from their culture, about their native country, where there was some mutual learning happening? I'll give you a quick example. Last week I had led a conversation class about voting and voting rights, and so we had a real interesting conversation about that. And some of the students who were from South America said, oh yeah, when it's voting time, all the liquor stores shut down for the week. And so they don't want people influenced by alcohol when they're voting, which is something very interesting, which I didn't know. But something you've learned either recently or maybe even years ago that really struck you. Something else I heard recently in a different conference was a woman was talking to one of her students from Somalia, and the woman was pregnant. And the volunteer or the teacher asked, oh, when are you due? And the woman from Somalia got offended by that. And she didn't know why. And eventually they talked about it and said, oh yeah, in Somalia, you don't ask someone's due date, right? Because by asking the due date, you then find out the conception date, right? And that's kind of a private thing. So they don't talk about due dates. So that was another interesting thing I've learned very recently. Just quickly, if you have something to share, like something you've learned about cultural difference recently, love to hear. Just take like 2 minutes for this. Anyone?
We've been working on a unit of sort of not how to call 911 and how to describe emergencies. Mm-hmm. And one thing my students pointed out to me is so many of their countries have very different rules about access to antibiotics or narcotic medicine. So that's been pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, my wife is from Colombia, and they just get antibiotics like that. You don't have to get a prescription or anything. Yeah, what's something else? Thanks for sharing, Dennis. Something else. Christina, Danny, Leslie, Dan, Rebecca, Shui, Sung, Karen, Farah. Nothing?
I got something. This is from a little while ago.
Yeah.
We were trying to open up discussion about racism in America, and it became a discussion about how a particular group in Guatemala were all drug dealers. Kind of went a little bit not as planned.
Yeah.
And we learned that. That was not something we were expecting.
Yeah.
A 5-minute discussion. And so that's what I've got to share.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
I found out something about a particular student. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but it's from Honduras, and he's been here for 15 years working, sending money back. He's actually divorced, but it's to pay, part of it's to pay for his children to go through high school. So there's a lot of countries where you have to sort of pay for that. But he also said that his family actually has a bunch of land with palm trees on it, for oil. And I'm like, why don't you go back and, harvest that oil and sell the oil? He's like, you can't get enough for it to even survive. I think it gives you some idea of the depth of the economic problem, where even if you can get a job, if you can work, it's starvation. What would, he's all alone here, and 15 years, and we just something a lot of people couldn't imagine having to do, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Great. Okay. Well, I'll get started with the presentation. Thank you all for sharing. Just a little warm up, get your brains thinking. And also, a lot of times we learn the most from these workshops from sharing with each other. So I'm going to move on to my slideshow. So the title of this, Fostering Judgment-Free Zones and Interesting Cultural Conversations that Fuel Mutual Learning and Accelerate Language Acquisition. I'll talk about all those things. This is a lot of content. I've done this workshop in 3 hours. This is an hour total. So I'm going to kind of skip over some parts and really just try to touch on the most important, most practical things that you can bring back to your class, to your organization. My goal is that you walk away with just one new thing that you want to implement. And so I'm pretty confident that you walk away with at least one thing, more. Real quick, at Intercambio, we're a nonprofit, and we see language acquisition really tied with connection and belonging. It's not these two separate things, but that the more you build your language and cultural skills and understand how society works and understand differences, you can form stronger connections, you have a stronger sense of belonging, and then that fuels even more language acquisition, more cultural skills. I just wanted to show this quick visual real quick because this is really kind of at the heart of this workshop and everything we do. The agenda here is we'll quickly talk about barriers and complexities of our work, of which there are many, especially when it comes to talking about culture. We'll talk about how to, cultural humility. This is a term that we are exploring more and more, and how it's at the heart of teaching and becoming learners instead of saviors. We'll talk about how to get students actually talking about interesting things. Because when they talk about interesting things, they want to talk more, and talking more is the key to unlocking language acquisition. So that's also this nice cycle. And then we'll talk about how to create safe environments where we can get our students talking, because a lot of these topics can kind of be minefields or turn into unsafe conversations. So we'll talk about some ways to really make it as safe as possible. And then if we have time, we'll talk about how to engage the broader community in conversations in our programs. We've established a really super powerful program called Community Conversations, where we bring in volunteers in the middle of every semester to talk with our students, kind of speed dating style. So I'll be happy to share that model because we're interested in sharing that with other programs. And then leave you with a couple of next steps. But first, who am I and what am I doing here? So I'm the director of a nonprofit organization in Boulder, Colorado. That's where I am right now. I grew up in the Maryland area, but left in '95. Haven't been back. I mean, I go back to visit my family, but I haven't lived there since. I started this organization with a friend 20 years ago, and since then we've had 15,000 adult English learners and volunteers come through our program. We do stuff all around the country, and we're excited about really providing high quality English education. Not every community has high quality programs. A lot do, a lot don't. We really want to increase retention. I talked to somebody recently who said, I started an English program, and when I was starting, people told me, expect like a 30 to 50% retention rate. And she was like, what? That's ridiculous. Why? I'm not just going to accept that that's the norm. Like, let's explore the barriers and really address the things that lead to low retention. So we also do that. We really focus a lot on retention. And then we want to improve, all these results from employment to, engagement in kids' schools, social integration, all those things. What I love most about this work is English classes provide such unique opportunities to connect with people from all different backgrounds, form strong bonds with them, have conversations about not only our similarities, but our differences. And with our society just being extremely polarized right now, English classes provide one of the antidotes to that, to the xenophobia we see. So that's why I personally love this work. We ask our students, how welcome do you feel in our community? Because that's something that we want people to feel. We want them to feel safe and welcome here. And our students have a much higher response to this question of, do you feel welcome in our county? 93% of our students who've been with us for a year or more say they do, versus 46% of the general population in our county says that they feel that our county is open to immigrants. So that's a powerful outcome. And then some other outcomes that we like to see is around job advancement. People earn more per hour, and their kids are graduating high school at higher rates. So we like to measure the soft stuff and the hard money and education outcomes. And we do a lot of stuff nationally. So these dots are organizations that we partner with around the country that use our curriculum that we've developed, that use our teacher training, and that we share ideas with as well. So we also learn from a lot of these organizations, because there's no right way of doing our work. There's lots of different ways of doing our work, and we love learning from all the different ways of doing this work. These are some of the tools that we provide. So the Confidence and Connections at the bottom, that's our full curriculum. Goes from intro to level 5. It's brand new. We just launched it in January. And then we also have a tool called the Immigrant Guide and Pronunciation Fun with Pictures. So you can see all those at our website. I won't go into those right now. So who participates in ESL programs? We got people from all kinds of different backgrounds, not just different nationalities, but different ages, different economic backgrounds, different academic backgrounds, different needs for language. We also, that also, creates a lot of cool opportunities that don't exist outside of ESL classes. And they also create challenges. So what are some of you can use your chat right now. What are some barriers to people learning English or even joining the programs in the first place? Just take 30 seconds or so. Write down something in the chat that emerges for you. What are some of the barriers that you've seen why people either don't last in our programs or they don't join in the first place? Or you can unmute and share verbally. Let's just take a second to brainstorm. What are some reasons? Big barriers. Time is a busy one, is a big one. Access, yeah, not all communities have access for people. If I have my free time is Tuesday and Thursday from 2 to 4, but there's no classes at that time, got no access. Family often takes precedent over it. Transportation, childcare, right? Sometimes their schedule is out of their control, right? What else? These are good. Cultural differences. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay. Good, so those are a few. So yeah, we got these: time, inconsistent work schedules, childcare. Some communities have affordable and accessible programs, and some communities don't. You got to pay money, so that's a barrier for some people. Transportation can be a barrier. Some of the less talked about ones. So you mentioned cultural differences. Confidence and low self-esteem. So we actually did surveys with our students or with the general population. And Farah, you nailed the #1 reason was the fear of making mistakes. We asked people, why aren't you taking English classes? And it wasn't time, it wasn't my work, wasn't work, it wasn't family. Those all came up. But the #1 thing was fear of making mistakes or fear of failing. And that was like, whoa, that is not what we thought, but that is the #1 barrier. So that is a very critical thing to know as teachers, as administrators, as all those things. And then there's cultural differences, right? If you don't feel safe in your class, if somebody says something that's offensive, if you feel like you're being judged, or if you feel like people aren't respecting you, you're gonna leave in a second. If there's any sense that you don't belong, you're just gone. And what are they gonna tell us? We're gonna say, oh, what happened? Why did you leave class? Oh, my work schedule changed, right? We're quick to accept that excuse, but that's not always the real excuse. Right? They often tell us what they think they want us, what we want to hear. And a lot of times just people feel slow progress. They feel stuck. Learning English is not a quick thing. It's a year, years and years. So yeah, so those are, some of the reasons. Yeah. And so we'll talk about, the importance of talking about mistakes, not just once, but really, over and over and over again. Yeah, Karen mentions the fear of making mistakes is tied to cultural conditioning. So that is it's a cultural thing as well, just the ability to make mistakes and move on. Good. So what is culture? We're talking about culture and cultural differences. Our students and teachers come from different cultural backgrounds. What does that mean? Culture is a lot of things. I like this definition here. It's religion, it's food, it's what we wear, how we wear it, it's marriage, music, what we believe is right or wrong, how we sit at the table, how we greet visitors, how we behave with loved ones, and a million other things. Cultural competence and cultural humility are two different things. A lot of times in the world of culture, we've typically talked about cultural competence, which is a good thing. It's these tools that we add to our toolbox to be able to have better interactions with people from different cultures. And that means different nationalities, different races, different ages, different educational backgrounds, different genders, different physical abilities, different sexual orientation, you know, all those things. So a quick example I use is, you know, it's a little minor example. Okay, I've learned that in Turkey, it's extremely offensive for someone to see the bottom of your feet. So I know that if I'm with a Turkish person, I'm not going to show them the bottom of my feet, and boom, I can avoid offending people. I just learned that in Vietnam, you know, fingers crossed is basically the equivalent of giving someone the middle finger. So I learned that. That's, you know, another tool I'll add to my cultural competence toolkit. Good thing. Cultural humility is a totally different thing, which we're talking about around equity a lot more, because cultural humility is this idea of ongoing self-reflection, wanting to learn more, critiquing yourself. And this really addresses the power imbalance around cultural competence, because who tends to be more culturally competent? People with higher education levels, people with more income, people who've had opportunities to travel around the world, live in different places, to, you know, read about it and those things. Whereas cultural humility, we're all coming in at the same level. We all have a lot to learn. We all have a lot to teach and share. And so that's kind of at the heart of this. I've talked to friends, you know, who are Black and in this world of equity and diversity, and they're like, yeah, this is about cultural humility. We're not talking about that enough. So this is at the heart of a lot of what I'm going to talk about. A quick example is, I hear teachers say this a lot. It's so annoying when students come in late to class and they don't just sit down quietly. This is pre-COVID. They don't just sit down quietly. They go and they greet each student individually and disrupt the class. And it's very disruptive and it's very disrespectful and it's very annoying. And why do they do that? Why do our students do that? Are they trying to be disrespectful? Are they trying to be disruptive of the class? Write in the chat if you have an idea of why students would disrupt the class in this way.
It's part of their culture to greet each other.
Yeah, right. It's part of their culture. It would be rude for them not to do that, right? It would be disrespectful not to do that. So we have these very different views of like what's polite and what's not. And, you know, as teachers, we need to really ground ourselves in the cultural humility of not just, oh, my way is the right way, right? As my way is just going, sitting down quietly and not disrupting the class, but really exploring like, okay, this is my lens, right? I see the polite ways this way, but other people are seeing it as something different. So that's just a specific example of something that, you know, happens a lot. So these are some cultural dimensions. I quickly talked about these. A lot of times we take, you know, it's easy for us to put people into a culture box. Like you're from Japan, you're high income, you're, you know, this or that. But really we bring a lot of stuff to our culture, and we got personality right in the middle, because personality is influenced by our culture and personality is part of our culture. So all these things, you know, did you grow up in Washington, D.C., or did you grow up in rural Maryland, right? That's probably going to impact a lot of aspects of your culture and your personality. So these are a lot of just elements of that. Next is, we'll get into a few specific cultural differences. Again, this is just to kind of ground us in this idea of humility before we go on to getting people talking about their experiences and sharing and speaking English more. So when we talk about cultural differences, we talk about generalizing. And we talk about the difference between generalizing and stereotyping. So generalizing is like the bell curve, right? Stereotyping is just like, all, you know, Mexican people see time this way, and all, you know, people from the big city see direct communication this way. Generalization is like, you know, in general, we see time differently in the US than they do in African countries or in Latin America, right? In general, we see interaction with teachers, right? My kids' teachers differently in the US than in Mexico. In general, you know, people receive compliments differently in Japan than they do in the US. So this isn't to say all people in Mexico see interaction with teachers this way and all people in Japan see compliments this way, but in general, there's a difference. So let's talk about it. And the generalization about US Americans is that US Americans hate generalizations. So if you're a US American who hates generalizations, you're reinforcing a generalization. So first generalization is around personal space, right? This, what you see, again, COVID time is a little bit, our comfort distance is 6 feet, but before COVID, and hopefully once COVID is done, this was our general distance that we stand in the US from each other when we talk, all right? For some of you, that is the comfortable distance. For some of you, that is too far. For some of you, that's too close. There's no right or wrong here, but for some of our, for some people, this distance is cold and unfriendly. And for other people, anything closer is really uncomfortable and, invading my personal space. The idea of boundaries is not just around physical space, it's about our invisible space. What are some things that you would not ask somebody or talk about who you just meet, right? You just meet me. Hey, Lee, nice to meet you. What is something you wouldn't ask me? You could either write in the chat again, or you can unmute yourself and share. What is something you would not ask me who you just met? Money. Yeah, we don't talk about money. You don't ask my age. It's always fascinating. Whenever I go into a class, whether it's online, I'm visiting an online class or an in-person class, I always just say, ask me 3 questions, ask me anything. And they always ask, how old are you? And it's a great opportunity to say, I'm okay answering that question. And it's okay to ask people about how old their kids are. In the US, some people don't like to answer that question. It's different. What's it like for you? Is that a comfortable question to ask? And people say, oh yeah, it's fair game in our country. Talking about money, fair game in our country. Talking about marital status, talking about kids, talking about those things. What about asking someone, what do you do for work? Is that an okay one? What do you do?
Depends on the context.
Depends on the context. Depends
If
on
it's a
the person.
networking event, absolutely.
Yeah, right, if it's a networking event. In English classes, usually that's a fair question because people need to talk in English about their job and be able to say the company and where they work and what they do and explain that. It's also, something that some races, they in general don't like that question, right? That's a question that's used by people to quickly size you up and judge you, right? Where do you work? It's not a question that's fair game for some people, and for others it is. That was an interesting one I learned about recently, reading a book about white privilege. Is like, that's a white privilege question to ask people. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I've been asking everyone that for years. Instead of asking, what do, you could say, what's your story? All right, because that way someone can say, oh, I work at this place, or they can talk about their family, or they can talk about where they're from, or they can talk about what they like to do. And it's them driving their story instead of what do you do, And again, some people are okay with that. So yeah, and what about these days? Especially these days, we do not talk about health. Well, yeah, that's usually a private thing. What's the big thing? I mean, what's going on right now? What do we have in two or 3 weeks from now?
Yeah.
Yes, the election. Yes, politics. We do not talk about politics with people we don't know. Totally different. And I've traveled a lot in Latin America. You get into a cab and they're like, who'd you vote for? It's like if you give the wrong answer, you can't get in their cab, right? So very, very different. So yeah, so just this idea of what's fair game and what's not. Our physical boundaries, our invisible boundaries. Time is something we see super different, right? I was brought up to think that it's super respectful to be on time. If you're late and you're telling that other person that your time is more important than their time, it's disrespectful, it's lazy, it's all these things. That's how I was brought up to think about time. And now I've come across people who have a totally different view of time. It's this more fluid thing. It's like, don't worry about it. You're late, I'm late. Who cares? It's all good. Yeah, it's just such a huge difference that we end up judging people on, and we create all these assumptions and like, this is better and this is worse, where it's really just different. There are, times where it's non-negotiable in the US when you have to be on time, court appointment, doctor's appointment, job, PTA meeting, things like that. But a lot of things are fluid and can be fluid. So I encourage you to think about, where are you on this spectrum of time? Are you someone who sees time as a controlled thing? Are you someone who sees time as a fluid thing? We're all in the middle somewhere, but which side are you on more? And what are the assumptions that you make about people on the other side? Because we all make assumptions. Let's try a quick breakout room. You guys is everyone up for a breakout room?
Sure.
All right. We're going to spend 5 minutes. I'm going to give you a scenario to discuss, maybe even less, maybe even 3 minutes. We'll right here. So here's the scenario. An Intercambio volunteer teacher, call her Linda, invites her, she has class with her student Martha on Monday. And Linda invites Martha to an event at her house. And Linda says, hey, Martha, I'm having some people over on Friday night around 6. Would you like to come? And Martha says, yes, I'd love to come. And Linda says, okay, great. Here's my address. Here's the phone number. You don't need to bring anything. We'll see you around 6 o'clock on Friday. And Martha says, okay. And it's great. Boom, done. And then Friday comes and goes, and Linda has her event, and Martha never shows up. She didn't call. She didn't text. None of that. What are some potential hypothetical cultural reasons why Martha would say yes and then not show up? And in your groups, don't talk about things like logistical things, like her car broke down or her kid got sick. Think about cultural things, why she would say yes on Monday and then not show up on Friday. Okay, there are no right or wrong answers. Try to come up with as many things as possible. Okay, so let's do groups of 3. You think that works, Tabitha? And Tabitha wrote the question in the chat. So what are some cultural reasons Martha would say yes on Monday and not show up on Friday?
All right, so we have groups of 3. I'm just going to move one person.
If you want to put on your video for this, it's great. If not,
All
great.
right, so rooms are open now. Lee, how long do you want to stay in the room?
Let's do 4 minutes.
All right, see you guys back here in 4 minutes.
All right, thank you.
Welcome back, guys. Everybody else is going to close in a few seconds. So you just came back more promptly than everybody else.
All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay. While you're here, what came up? Who wants to share something real quick?
Maybe saving face.
Saving face. So say a little more about that.
In some cultures, you know, like teachers are revered and they're seen as like, you know, folks of authority and very well respected. And so you don't say no. And so, yeah, so perhaps it was a saving face moment.
Yeah. Yep. What else? Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, on similar lines, we talked about if saying no directly is considered impolite, but just sort of not showing up is okay, then obviously the more polite thing to do is accept the invitation and then not show up.
Yeah.
So different politeness norms.
Right. Totally different. Yeah, I remember a friend from Mexico once told me, he's like, if I ever got invited to a party and just said at that moment, like, thanks for the invitation, but I can't go. He said that person would never invite me again. I was like, makes no sense, right? But made total sense to him because that's what was polite to him, and that's how he grew up, and that's how he understood it. And it was just like, whoa, so different when it comes to that. What else? What other possible reasons?
One of the politeness, another politeness related possibility is that the student thinks that the teacher is just being polite to invite them. But there's, again, as I think it was Karen who mentioned this view, this is an authority figure, and so it's an intimidating situation.
Right.
To go.
Yeah. Yeah, the power differential. How many times did Linda invite Martha?
Just
One.
once, I think.
Is one invitation a real invitation? For some people, yes. For some people, no, right? If someone's like, Lee, do you want some ice cream? I'll be like, hell yeah, I want some ice cream, right? For some people, it's like, hey, Lee, do you want some ice cream? No, I'm okay, I'm good. I'm not hungry. You sure? I got some really good ice cream. No, don't worry about it. Here, here's some chocolate. Thanks, that was awesome, right? So it's the same conversation, but just two very different ways of having it, right? So in some cultures, for some people, one invitation is just being polite, right? It's the second invitation, even maybe a third invitation, that makes it a real invitation.
Not even get into who pays the check. I've been in some epic battles.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah. And then we talked in our group about someone mentioned how, what to bring is really important in some cultures. And, Linda said, you don't need to bring anything, which might be great for some people and might be really awkward for some people. In my group, we also talked about, just the discomfort. For some people are more comfortable going to a setting where they don't know anybody and meeting people and having new conversations. And for other people, it's like, no, I if I come from a collective culture, it's like my family and that's it, right? I'm not interested in expanding my network here. I got enough family. No, other ones, one more possible one. Miss anything? All right. Thank you for doing that. I'm participating in that. I'll go back to my share here. So yeah, so yes and no, very different things. And again, tie back to cultural humility because we just have our lens, but it's really important that we learn about all these different lenses when it comes to direct communication, indirect communication. Another quick example is like, might have a friend who calls me and says, hey Lee, can I get a ride to the airport on Sunday at 3? Say, sure, no problem, I'll pick you up. Boom. Another friend might call and say, hey Lee, how you doing? Good. How are you? Good. Hey, blah, blah, blah. I got this car 10 years ago and blah, blah, blah. It stopped working and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And I got to get to the airport this Sunday at 3. I'm not sure how I'm going to get there, blah, blah, blah. And hey, did you see that soccer game yesterday? All right. What's the second person asking me for? Right at the airport in a very different, roundabout, indirect way. You know, and I might, as a direct communicator, I might not even pick up on that. I might say, oh yeah, I did see that soccer game. Or I might know that he's asking me for a ride to the airport and say, oh, I can take you to the airport. And he's going to come back with, oh, no, I can't ask you to do that. You're too busy. Oh, it's no problem. I don't have plans Sunday. No, Lee, I could never put you out like that. I'll pick you up at 3. Is that okay? Oh, Lee, thanks. You're a lifesaver. Right? It's the same conversation, just in a very roundabout way, right? Where are you on this spectrum? Are you more of a direct communicator, right? You say what you mean, or are you more of an indirect communicator? Just want you to reflect on that for a second and think about what kind of assumptions do you make about people on the other side? What kind of judgments do you make about people on the other side, right? Direct communicators, it can drive them crazy to have an indirect communicator, right? And so we stay apart, right? It's just easier to connect with people who see the world like me, who communicate like me, who see time like me. But really important that we step out of that comfort, or else we just end up hanging out with people like us and having conversations with people like us. But in our world, we've got bigger and better opportunities. So this is a big thing: judging versus noticing, facts or explanations, observation or interpretation. Let's look at this first one. She's disorganized and disrespectful of other people's time. Is that an observation or an interpretation? We'll call that an interpretation. Yeah. She often shows up 10 minutes after meetings start. What do you think? Those of you who yeah, observation. I used to say she shows up 10 minutes late for meetings, but 10 minutes late, so for some people, 10 minutes doesn't mean late, right? The word late is even relative. So 10 minutes after a meeting is supposed to start. Man is angry.
Probably interpretation.
Interpretation. Could be an observation. Depends how angry they are. The man is speaking in a loud voice and using lots of arm gestures. Observation, right? So when we see people talking like this, it's like, whoa, that guy's pissed off, right? But no, they're just talking about lunch, right? I've seen people, they look like they're in these heated arguments. It's like, is everything okay? It's like, yeah, we're just talking about lunch. Really? That's not how I talk about lunch. That's just not how I talk about lunch, right? When I get upset, I do things, you know, we typically talk with our voices elevating these things, but for some people, that's just how they normally talk. He's untrustworthy. Call that interpretation. He told me he was going to the event, but he did not show up. Observation. So that's the Linda Martha example, right? Someone might say, you know, Linda was probably upset. She's like, Martha said yes, and she didn't show up. I'm disappointed. I don't know if I could trust Martha, right? Her word was yes, and then she didn't show up. So again, we make all these assumptions. This is a really powerful tool that I got exposed to recently called the Ladder of Inference. It's this idea that basically we enter every interaction with incomplete data. Yet we still climb up this ladder and make assumptions, and we form conclusions and beliefs, and then those beliefs impact what we see. So like a quick example is, you know, I saw somebody pull up to the food bank to get free food, and they had a super nice truck, right? How many of us have made judgments of those people, formed conclusions, created, you know, even taken actions from that? It's like, oh man, the person's totally gaming the system. Can't believe they're doing that. I'm going to stop supporting this food bank because they don't really need our money, because they're just giving it to people who are gaming the system, right? So that's an example of how you can climb up this ladder too quickly versus explore all the different options, right? I don't have all the data. Maybe he's picking up food for a neighbor. Maybe he just got this, you know, maybe he just lost his job and it's really, you know, looking to sell his truck. We don't know. We don't have all the data, but we constantly take just the limited data we have and just start forming assumptions and conclusions. So that's another element of cultural humility. Agree or disagree. This is part of a separate cultural humility training that I do. We could spend hours just on the following 9 questions, but I'm just going to cruise through it. We talked about this one. It's okay to ask people you meet, what do you do for work? For some people, yes. For some people, no. All meetings should start and end on time. Some people really feel strongly about that. Some people feel strongly against it, right? For a lot of different cultural reasons. It's rude to interrupt someone while they're talking, right? Most people, when I do this workshop, say, oh yeah, absolutely. It's extremely rude to interrupt someone while they're talking. That answer, whether someone agrees or disagrees, depends on a lot of things, right? What if you grew up with 7 siblings? If you never interrupted someone at the dinner table, you probably never spoke. right? In some cultures, in some countries, in some, lots of different backgrounds, it's expected to interrupt people. Someone offers to help me, it's okay to accept the first offer. For some people, yes. For some people, no. You got to offer a second or third time. A friend is someone you've known for a long time, right? A lot of people in the US will say, yeah, I can meet someone quickly and kind of strike up a friendship versus for some people, no, a friend is someone you've known for several years, for a long time, for 20 years or more. That's what trust is. If you're upset, it's better to communicate about it quickly. Different culturally, different personality. Saying hi to strangers is important for the community. Right? A lot of people say, yeah, of course that's important for the community. Well, what if you live in a busy city? You don't say hi to random people in a busy city. What if you are of a certain religion or a certain gender? It's not as easy for you to just say hi to random people. They might get the wrong impression. It might be against your religious beliefs, right? I heard something interesting recently. It was a teacher whose student was from the Middle East, and she's like, why do people say thank you, like when people open doors for each other and things like that? And I was like, oh, it's so interesting, right? It's just expected. If I open a door for somebody at a store or whatever, I expect them to say thank you. If they just walk through and don't say anything, I'm like, damn, that's rude, right? For some people, for her perspective, her lens was, no, thank you is for big stuff, right? We don't waste our thank yous on little things. Like, we say thank you. Oh, you donated a kidney for me. Thank you. Oh, you opened a door for me at the store. Thank you, right? It's the same two words. So they say thank yous for something, big things, which was just another fascinating, little difference. But that, again, think about if you open a door for someone and they just walk in and don't say anything, boom, you climb up that ladder. Wow, it's so rude. People from the Middle East are so rude. They don't say thank you. Making direct eye contact shows people you're paying attention, right? Eye contact means totally different things for different people, right? I don't like eye contact when I have a one-on-one meeting. I like to look down. I can focus more. Other people are like, Lee, pay attention. Look at me when I'm talking. It's like, no, that's not how I operate, right? That's also, country to country can be very different. I only share about my personal life with people I know very well. Also a very different thing. Some people are like, no, you got to share. If you want to build strong, bonds and trust with people at your job, you got to share about your life. Other people are like, no, I like to keep it separate. Which is better or worse? Neither. All of these, not better or worse, just very different, but important to know about the differences. What happens when helping and learning in our English programs is just one directional? When we're the teacher and they're the learner, what happens? A lot of people feel that power differential, and they're not going to share a lot. They're not going to learn as much as they can possibly learn. When the helping and the learning is multi-directional, then we enhance the belonging, the confidence, the teachers become learners, the students become teachers, and the best teachers are often the best learners, which means we can really learn from our students. We can get them talking. We can get them to share their experiences and their perspectives. And that helps language acquisition, because to gain language acquisition, to get better at speaking a language, what do you need? You need practice speaking the language. And when we just do boring role play dialogues, okay, let's practice, calling the doctor again to make an appointment. That's valuable, but it's not nearly as valuable as having a robust conversation about cultural differences, about these things. That's, when we spark these interesting things about, voting and discrimination or rights or differences in the health system or the financial system or education system. That's when they're like, yeah, I like to talk about this. I want to explore and find new words to talk about these things. And so that's what expands their language acquisition as well. So it's really a win-win-win, because they get talking more, helps their language acquisition, and we learn more when they talk about interesting things other than just, let's practice this dialogue, returning this item at a store. Right. Also, we got to spend some time on that because they might want to return stuff, but that's not the stuff that really sparks the language acquisition. So how do we spark these meaty conversations? It's hard for teachers to bring up some of this stuff. When it's in a book, it feels safe. So I encourage you, whatever curriculum you're using, it helps if it has these conversations in there, because it's not just you. It's not just like the student being like, why is my teacher bringing up this conversation? What's their intention? It's like, no, this is part of the lesson. This is part of the book. In our books that we create, every lesson has a culture tip and a connect with conversation activity that gets people talking about interesting topics. The one on here is like birth and death, right? You're not going to feel comfortable talking about that on your own, but if it's in a curriculum, it could spark some interesting conversation. What are the different, traditions you have around birth or death? What are you thankful for? What What are your biggest regrets in life? What was your earliest memory? What was your first job? You know, things that get them talking about their life, their perspective. You know, this is about, you know, many children leave home to go to college, right? I was 17 when I left home. My wife is from Colombia, and she was 26 when she first left her home. Very different ways of doing things. It's our anniversary today also, so happy anniversary. And when we're talking about this stuff, it can be really important for you to humanize yourself by also talking about this stuff, right? If you talk about a question about like, what was your first job? You know, talk about your first experience with this. For you to share first, one, it humanizes you, and two, it kind of makes it more comfortable for them to start sharing their perspectives and their experiences. And it gets them asking you questions as well. So have them ask you questions. This isn't always about us interviewing our students. So, you know, to model it. And also it's important for us teachers to model the respect and the cultural humility. It's also important, like when you go to a conversation, it helps to kind of build up to the conversation. So a lot of what we do is we build the vocab, and the grammar, and the reading and the writing and the speaking and the listening to get to kind of culminate with the conversation about this stuff. Because if you just start with the conversation, they're not always prepared to have it. So you kind of have the hard skills, the language skills, and then you have the soft skills on the other side, which is making it safe. We'll talk about that and ways to do that. And then scaffolding up to it. So we do activities like, you know, we'll have them write some things, think about some things, and then have the conversation about, you know, what's different in your life now than when you were a kid. You know, I used to live in here, now I live here. I used to play soccer a lot, now my knee is terrible and I don't play soccer anymore, right? So you're learning about each other, you're learning about their history, you can learn about perspectives this way, all kinds of things. And then it connects, and then you culminate with the conversation. The Immigrant Guide, another tool we use, is also an opportunity to talk about these things. So we'll talk about, like, here's some common scams in the US happening right now. You know, the IRS does not call you and ask you for money, right? What kind of scams do you have where you're from, right? What kind of scams have you experienced here? So they're learning life skills, and they're, you know, you're opening the door for them to share about their experiences and their perspectives, what it's like in their native country, you know, being pulled out. You know, I had a really interesting conversation recently about interaction with police here and in their native country. We talked about the difference between protests here and in their native country. Lots of, you know, that's when like they really want to talk and share, and it's cool. Like I learned a lot about, in Iran, they don't have protests because they'll just kill them. Right? I was like, oh yeah, I guess it's a little different there. Health system's different, you know, a lot of things are just very different. Okay, so talking about profound things. How do we create judgment-free zones? That's a big part of this training. And if you have other ideas as you're looking here, put them in the chat, because this is something we're developing right now. We're like adding this to our training. And so this is kind of just a first stab at it. So one, an important thing is it can be scary for students to share perspectives, right? You're in a class with people from 5 different countries, 10 different countries, different educational backgrounds. That can be scary. So how do we make it less scary? One is we can always give them an out. Right? When I introduce this topic, we're going to talk about family today. If you don't want to share about your family, just raise your hand and we won't ask you any questions to share about your family. I have this other assignment you can do, or you can just listen as we talk. But, you know, for some people, talking about their family is traumatizing. So we don't want to force that. Talk about mistakes. This goes back to our barriers, right? Number one fear, our number one barrier to learning English, fear of making mistakes. So talk about it every class. You know, today we are going to make mistakes, right? Make it comfortable by not just talking about it the first day of class, but like every class, right? Encourage, create an environment where they encourage each other to make mistakes. Be interested in cultural differences. I talk about this, like this is an opportunity. We can learn from each other's perspectives, be interested. This is not about judging and saying, you know, oh, the way they do it here is wrong. It's about learning. And you know, before you dive into some, you know, potentially divisive conversations, it's good to have some trust built. So maybe not the first day to bring up things about, you know, that touch on religion at all, or politics, or any of that stuff, and then have fun. And, you know, really, again, model that openness to share, model the openness to say, you know, I used to judge this, you know, I used to judge people who were late. I used to judge people who said yes to an invitation and didn't come. But now I just see it as different. All right. And then this other idea is of belonging. You know, belonging is super important, right? If students don't feel belong, boom, they're gone. I got this from a book called The Culture Code that I was listening to part of it, and I really like this part. It talked about 3 things that you can do to make students feel like they belong. One is show them that you're invested in what's going on, which is basically being prepared, right? If you're prepared, you'll be like, okay, my teacher cares, they're investing some energy. Individualization ties to, you know, getting to know them, right? Understand their perspectives, understand their history, their goals, their hardships, their contributions to society, all these things. The more you can individualize your learning of them, the better. And then I really like this future orientation. So signal to them that I'm here with you. I'm here until the end, right? Patience, super important, right? If our students sense any sign of impatience, they're out of there. They don't feel welcome or safe. Creating a mistake-friendly class. So how you offer corrections is really important. We do workshops just on offering corrections, so I won't get into that. But you know, how you get people repeating, how you really like call out individuals for the mistakes, but get a whole class to repeat the mistake at once is really important. Creating the right physical space is important. So if you can if you can create an environment where people are not looking at the backs of heads, but they can see each other's faces, whether that's a horseshoe or a circle, makes a huge difference in just the welcoming feeling of a class. And then even on Zoom these days, you know, make sure that the lighting is good and that, you know, you're not just like talking like this where they can only see the bottom of your mouth, or like my aunt does like this. You know, make sure that you have it's also important these days because this is the future. We're going to be offering online classes for eternity, it looks like, and we'll have some mix of in-person and online, but this is here to stay because people like it. And then another thing is, this is also a completely separate workshop we do, but it's about simplifying your English. Really important for low levels, intermediate levels. I would never talk to them the way I'm talking to all of you right now at this pace, right? I would be speaking more clearly, not exaggeratingly clear and not patronizingly clear, but more clear. I would slow down quite a bit and pause. I would use fewer words, right? So, and I would avoid metaphors, idioms, things like that. And this is a hard one, is to limit the use of tricky 2-word phrasal verbs like given, ask out, kick back, because when you separate those words, they mean different things than when you put them together. So speaking simple English is incredibly hard. Whenever I walk into a level 1 class, a level 2 class, my goal is for them to understand 100% of what I say. Because if they do, confidence goes up. If they don't understand what I say, confidence goes down. So how we talk to our students is super important. And it's hard to do. It's easy to turn on the consciousness button. It's hard to get really good at. I've been practicing this consciously for 15 years, and I'll still say stuff. I'm like, God damn it, they're not going to understand how I just said that. I need to rephrase it. I need to say it again. You know, it doesn't come to us naturally. So this is something that takes a lot of practice. And something that one of my staff members added as a bonus tip is when you don't understand someone, don't make confused faces at them. She's like, I hate when people don't understand me and they're like, So, you know, don't make those faces. So an activity, you can do this on your own, we don't have time for this, is to simplify these. So how would you say these things in like 5 words instead of 50 to express the same thing? Using correct English, but really simplifying, creating fewer words, how to do these things. So that is, yeah. All right, we got 5 minutes. We're almost done here. I want to leave it. And then provide concrete encouragement. You know, instead of saying, great job, say, now you can do this before you could not do this, right? Now I really understand how you pronounce the TH sound. Beautiful. It was terrible before. Anything concrete you can point to. Yeah, let's see, I'm gonna skip some of this. Okay, and then I'll talk just for a minute about our community conversations, which is when we bring in volunteers to talk to our students to practice speed dating style. Amazing, because our students lack confidence to speak with people in the real world outside of their class. And so this brings in 3 new people they talk to each time. And it builds their confidence, it builds connections in the community. It gives volunteers an introduction to our program. If you're interested in that, you can contact me and we can share this. This is kind of the structure we use. We rotate 2 or 3 times. It's a 90-minute, you know, 60-minute conversations, 30-minute orientation. It's really powerful. All right, I want to wrap up by just hearing from a few of you. What is something that you will take away from this training, something you learned, something you want to implement in your program? You can just write in the chat and I'll share, or you can unmute yourself. We've got a couple of minutes. And then also, whoops, if we can, here's the post-conference survey. We'd love to get your feedback on this. I know this went by fast. It was a lot of content. I'd like to do more breakout rooms. But we do offer webinars and workshops on some of these things. Some of these topics are on cultural humility, simple English, making corrections, those things. Tabitha, I don't know if you can copy and paste that into the chat. And love to hear, oh, excellent, you're on top of it. So yeah, if you wanna, I'm gonna stop my share here, and so I can see people. And if you have just something, I want to hear as many as possible, just quickly, like one thing you're taking away from this that you want to implement in your program, or something you learned. A lot of this is not new, but it never hurts to reinforce some of this stuff, especially the cultural stuff. What's something you learned? Dan, you want to share something?
Well, yeah, when I think about it, I don't know that I'm really preparing everybody to discuss something as much as they need, you know, because you have low intermediate, high intermediate, middle intermediate.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, you're trying to move things along and you might skip, you know, just got to slow down and
yeah,
give them the phrases and the sentence stems and do a little more practice. I don't think I'm probably not preparing them to be open to talk. I like the idea of, you know, how it gets the language acquisition going. Like that's really worth the trouble, you know?
Yeah, cool.
Maybe I'm just not, yeah.
Yeah, it's always more to learn. It's not easy, but practice. Cool, thanks, Dan. Others, yeah, Rebecca said, be specific instead of just the general great job. Can be very powerful.
Cultural humility versus cultural competence.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Karen. And there's actually a word that is used, cultural compatibility, which combines the two. It's not a real word, but it's kind of, it's about the competence and it's about the humility. And when you combine those things, it's a beautiful thing.
The tongue twister.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for pointing out, Rebecca, the survey. We were missing a letter in the survey. Intercambio.org. Good. What else? What else?
One quick suggestion. You talked about getting people to be comfortable making mistakes, and I do that, like you said, I do that day one every day. And one way I think it's helping is to make it to show results. Like as people give back answers and their words missing or incorrect or whatever, I'm writing them up there.
Yeah.
Strongly encourage them. No, keep going. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Put the blanks in there, and then come and say, well, tell me what to do. Well, let's fix this.
Yeah.
And they can see that and that's from writing instruction pedagogy, you know, use their own language to teach the lessons. And I think it's working. I see them talking more and being a little less reluctant. You know, again, those low intermediates who are very reluctant.
Yeah.
Talk.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So results.
Cool. Yeah, and Karen, yeah, I think we'll be sharing the presentation with people who fill out the feedback form, so you can get a copy of the slides there. Oh, and then also the recordings will be there. Yeah, if you fill out the feedback, Kira from our team will send you the link. So yeah, thanks for joining. Appreciate it, Karen.
My apologies.
Oh, yeah,
I meant to say Tabitha as opposed to Rebecca. My apologies.
Oh, no worries. Others, we got time for one last takeaway. Usually it's helpful for William. You got one? Yeah. Who else? Yeah, Shui.
Yes, so my takeaway is to use simple language and how that's super powerful especially for low intermediate students, because I learn English as my second language as well, and I feel strongly connected to like being able to understand everything, and that's making me more motivated to learn English. And now I'm a teacher and I think about how sometimes I want to sound like more sophisticated in front of my students, but maybe that doesn't work as well as, using more simple languages.
Yeah, awesome, cool, good. All right, well, I want to respect our time and thank all of you for being interested in this topic, and thank you, Tabitha, and your whole team for setting this up. We are very accessible. If you're interested in learning more about the other stuff we offer, you can visit our website, intercambio.org, and yeah, if you fill out the feedback form, we'll be sure to send you stuff, or not if you don't want. So yeah, but thank you all for doing this work. Also, this is super important work at a time where our society needs this connection, cross-cultural connection, more than ever. So I appreciate you all for being in this field. It's a very special field overall, and I hope we have the opportunity to work with all of you more. So thank you, Rebecca, thank you, Sung, thank you, Glenn, thank you, Tway, thank you, Farah, thank you, Karen, thank you, Christina.
All right, and thank you, Lee, for your engaging presentation. I have a few announcements for everybody. If you haven't yet completed the attendance survey, please do so. I'm also going to share a link to the overall conference feedback form. Please complete that as well. That'll help us continue to improve our future events, whether virtual or in person. And then our final session is starting now. So I'm going to put the link to the chat in there. There's just one final session, so you can just click on that link and be taken over there. And we'll see you guys over there soon, we hope. Thank you, everybody, for attending the conference.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you to WATESOL for organizing.
Yeah, that was great.
Really our pleasure.